Hi guys, this is the first episode I'm shooting for this series of episodes that I'm going to do about Meta or earlier called as Facebook. Now, I think for me, Facebook is a really important company in the history of technology industry. Um, I'll tell you why I believe so. Uh, Facebook has 4 billion monthly active users. Uh, just to give you an approximation of how big they are in terms of scale at which they operate, uh, total world population today is around 8 billion, out of which roughly 5.5 billion people are online or internet users. Uh, out of this 5.5 billion, roughly a billion is from China. So remaining is roughly 4.5 billion, 4.4 billion users. Out of this 4.4, 4.5 billion users, 4 billion use one of the Facebook products monthly, every month, and 3 billion, over 3 billion use the products daily. That's the that's as crazy as you can go in terms of penetration on any product. If Facebook were a civilization, this would be the largest civilization in the history of the universe. At its peak, the Roman Empire used to have 35%, 40% of the global population under its umbrella. Facebook, if you think of it in terms of the total TAM which is humanly possible to achieve, they have already done 92% of that uh, TAM. And this was not easy. Uh, in the last 20 years, their journey has been incredible, led by uh, the guy known as Mark Zuckerberg. And Mark is a very unique figure because, uh, again, starting a social network was not just another startup, right? Because this company effectively gave an individual right to create content on their own and basically provide them with a platform to distribute that platform content to the world. Uh, you imagine 20 years back, if you were to say something, your voice would only be heard if you are a news media anchor or a radio jockey. But today, with the social network, which was effectively invented with Facebook, you can effectively reach out to the world. You don't need any credibility or badge of honor. Your idea or the content you produce is what you are judged on. And if it's good enough, you will be known across the world. Mr. Beast is an example of this. Uh, Kardashian, Kim Kardashian, Kylie Kardashian, and the entire Kardashian family is an example of it. They don't need uh, a media channel. Uh, they don't need a centralized. Now, nobody needs a centralized media outlet. So you're not anymore controlled by the 15 to 20 gatekeepers uh, that used to control who would be whose ideas would be available to the world. Now, effectively, anybody can produce content. I think what I want to start with, because Facebook is such an interesting company, and uh, I think that they would be the biggest company in the world, and Mark Zuckerberg would be the richest in the world in maybe 5 years, in terms of what they have done. Facebook has done literally everything. Mark Zuckerberg has literally he has launched a phone. He has done large infra scale servers, large capex on servers. Uh, he has created a crypto network or a crypto coin. He has created basic infrastructure for internet to be provided to many users through internet.org. free internet to be was provided under that initiative. He has almost launched any product that you can think of for the technology industry. Now, his current big bets are AI, obviously, in software, and he's betting on the hardware side with Meta glasses, Quest as a headset. I want to start with talking about the kind of people that got into his life, or the kind of people that Mark associated himself with, that probably was the reason for him to be so successful. And you could see those indicators way before everybody else. Uh, if you look at the people that were associated with him so early on, I would start with his early uh, co-founders, right? I want to talk about all the people that sort of associated with Mark. Uh, Facebook obviously was a Mark Zuckerberg production, which was written for the longest of the period initially when they started. But interestingly, they uh, it was largely started with the roommates, Andrew McCollum and Dustin Moskowitz, uh, uh, and Chris Hughes. Chris Hughes and Dustin used to be room partners with Mark. There was this other guy, Billy Olson, who was not involved. And then there were two other co-founders, Andrew McCollum and Eduardo Sabrin. Uh, Eduardo was the one person in that movie, Social Network, which you would have seen. Eduardo, obviously, he came from he wasn't a technical person, right? He was a finance guy, in and out business guy. He was part of the investment club. But how Mark and Eduardo met was because Eduardo was also Jewish and Mark was also a Jewish. They had a fraternity, which is called as AP fraternity, Alpha Epsilon fraternity. This is a Jewish fraternity. Through which they sort of met. And that just is an incredible example of how you connect with different individuals and how still things like which caste you belong to plays a very important role here. In Eduardo meeting Mark, and Eduardo obviously ends up investing that $1,000 initial investment for which he gets 30% stake in the company initially. And the story, I think I would leave all of you to watch the movie Social Network to know the other part of it. So these were the co-founders. I think Andrew and Chris. Chris used to look at PR. Andrew was another coder. They sort of went back to college after working with Facebook for those 2, 3 months when they were at San Francisco, and then they got back and joined Facebook, and they still continue to be co-founders. Um, uh, Most important people after the co-founders were the investors, right? And I think all of you famously know that Peter Thiel took that 500K bet on Facebook, owning roughly 10% of Facebook in making that bet. But how that happened was very funny and interesting. So Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg obviously met Sean Parker when he was in SF, and they gelled really well. They started working together. Sean started advising Facebook during that time, but Sean suggested that he raise money to get more servers. They needed money, so he sort of connected them to Reid Hoffman, who had founded LinkedIn at that time already, and who was also the founder of SocialNet in 1997, which was effectively the first try at creating a social network. And he also made him meet Mark Pincus, who used to run Zynga, who later founded Zynga. I would say Zynga, Farmville. If you have used Facebook during those 2008 to 2010, 12, everybody would have played Farmville, I'm sure. So Mark started that company later, but Mark Pincus and Reid Hoffman, they were doing their own thing. they liked the idea after meeting Zuckerberg, and they decided that they would connect him to Peter Thiel because they didn't had enough money to sort of bet on uh, the company because they were doing their own ventures, and obviously if you want to keep money for your stuff rather than investing in other ventures. So they decided to introduce him to Peter Thiel. Interestingly, another guy called Matt Kohler was working with Reed on LinkedIn at that time. He was also part of that meeting, which happened with Peter, where he decided to invest 500K. Uh, the Matt Kohler became CPO of Facebook, went on to Benchmark, joined Benchmark later in 2008, and he uh, invested in Instagram, then was instrumental in selling Instagram to Facebook. Instagram is now effectively the largest business under Facebook umpire, and he also invested in Snapchat and many other companies. So Matt became a partner in Benchmark and one of the greatest partners in their history. Uh, so that happened. Another famous investor, I would say, is David Breyer, who was at Excel, a partner at Excel. So Breyer invested through Excel 13 million at $100 million valuation, which was the first proper institutional round for Facebook. And he also invested his personal money of $1 million. So $1 million check he wrote on his own, which was very rare at that point in time. That just shows the belief that he had on his investment at that time. So this obviously happened. Yuri Milner invested later. Yuri Milner is a Russian billionaire. DST Global is a fund he runs. He invested much later, but he invested at like a 10 billion valuation. Just before this, Microsoft invested at a 15 billion valuation, so they have a down round later on. Uh, Microsoft became a major partner because they were running the ad services marketplace for Facebook. So earlier, Facebook didn't have an exchange of their own, uh, ad exchange, where buyers can come in and buy ad slots. So they used Microsoft services, and Microsoft effectively knew a lot about Facebook. Bill and Mark got very close, and that's how that investment happened. I think the first mentor that came into the picture very early on was Sean Parker, who was very instrumental. Sean Parker, for those of you who don't know, he started Napster. I'm sure all of you would have downloaded music through one of these torrents, right? Which P2P uh, P2P downloads can be done, peer-to-peer downloads can be done. Sean effectively started the first company that does this in 97. Obviously, it was an illegal business because nobody was making money in this model. But Sean sort of started this in way back in 97. Sean then started a couple more companies, then met Zuckerberg, and he obviously gelled really well. And he obviously became president of Facebook, was really critical in just advising Zuckerberg to that 5 years period until 2010, roughly on all things products. And Sean also ended up identifying Spotify. He joined Founders Fund with Peter Thiel and identified Spotify as an investment. Sean had an incredible ability to sort of figure out an idea which would do really well and just go after it, all guns blazing. So he always had this idea in his head that there would be a music provider after the Napster event happened. Napster got shut down because there were multiple cases. So Spotify was a legal way to do it because they had done deals with the music label companies and were launching it in a more legal way. So he sort of identified Spotify. Spotify's was Europe, so this was nowhere in the SF Valley territory where most of these startups would actually be founded. So he identifies Spotify. Daniel writes an email to him, invests money through Founders Fund, gets them to US, makes a deal with all the US labels, and get them going. So very instrumental in their journey. He now works with as a board member at Obama Foundation, works on a multiple initiative on life sciences and other stuff. So that's Sean for you. Uh, Peter, obviously, I think everybody knows how instrumental. I think Sean and Peter had a lot of influence on how Mark Zuckerberg thought about general company strategy and building products. Sean obviously also helped a lot in product building. But those these two people, I think, are the pillars of Mark Zuckerberg's thinking about how to build a business, successful business in the Valley. Um, Don Graham, who was the founder of Washington Post, was also a key mentor. He helped in hiring Sheryl Sandberg, who effectively built the ads business. He was chief of staff at White House, then built the entire Google business. Don convinced Sheryl to join Mark and other senior members as well. So Don was very instrumental in that way. He was actually going to lead the Series A or Series B, whatever you call for Facebook at 60 million valuation. Then Excel came in at 100 million valuation and did that round. But before that, Don was going to lead that round.